Welcome to Straight Talk, one-on-one conversations with newsmakers and opinion shapers. I'm Dhaka Tribune editor Zafar Sobhan, and today, for the first episode of season 3, I'm joined by economist Dr. Ashikur Rahman, who has of late made quite a name for himself, perhaps even earned himself some notoriety, for his uncompromising and impassioned commentary on the COVID-19 crisis that Bangladesh and indeed the world is facing. Ashik, welcome to Straight Talk.
Thank you, Zafar Bhai. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. And now, before we start, I'd like to take a few moments to honor the memory of Mr. Shamim Latifur Rahman, the founding chairperson and CEO of Transcom Group, who passed away this morning peacefully in his sleep at his parental family home in Kumilla. Mr. Rahman was 75 years old and well known and respected as a titan of Bangladeshi business. For those of us in the media world, he was especially an important figure as the proprietor of 2 newspapers, the Daily Star and Prothomalo, which transformed the media landscape of Bangladesh, into which every journalist practicing today owes a debt of thanks and gratitude. It seems to me that altogether too many of our luminaries are leaving us this year, sometimes due to COVID, and others, as is the case with Mr. Rahman, for other reasons, but certainly 2020 has been a cruel year for us here in Bangladesh, and I would just like to take a moment to extend my condolences in deep sorrow to Mr. Rahman's family. Ashik.
Yes.
And this is it. I think, if I remember correctly, the last time I was on air with you for a Tribune Talks, it had actually been the day which Nilüfer Manzoor had passed away.
Exactly.
And so it's just really, I mean, it's very, very shocking, just one after the other. This has been a terrible year for Bangladesh, sometimes partly due to COVID-19, but just partly in any event, it seems.
I agree, and I want to give my condolence messages for everybody. I think especially the frontline workers that we are losing every day. And I think, as you correctly said, that this is a global problem, and Bangladesh will take a blow, and we are taking a blow. The question now is that are we doing the right things? And I like I like the introduction you gave me. It's like probably I've been now raising the red flag for far too long without any influence perhaps on policy, because we are seeing over the last 2 months that the policy correction that many of us were hoping for did not happen. And we are now, and as I predicted in that last webinar with you, that we are going to open up, and either a hard lockdown or zonal lockdown or whatever the audience were supporting at that time. But none of that happened, and we opened up. And
we heard a lot of talk about a zonal lockdown which was coming. There were a lot of plans. We heard there was going to be a red zone, a yellow zone, a green zone, and then very mysteriously, there were rumors being going around that it was going to happen in a matter of days. In the areas which had been flagged or identified, we wrote about them in the newspaper, and then all of a sudden, without much fanfare, it seems as though that has now been shelved. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, as I said, that I think that has been thrown to the dead zone. There's no doubt about that anymore. I think we are pretty clear about what has been on the news, that we are opening up. And I think what is frustrating and depressing about this entire last 2 months is I am not too worried about that. Many people keep saying that we got many things wrong. We were not prepared. I think many countries were not prepared, and we saw in US.
This is an absolutely unprecedented, hopefully once in a lifetime crisis. Global
exactly.
Crisis. We've never seen anything like this in our lifetimes.
Exactly. So many countries were not prepared, and I was never very critical about that issue, that we were not prepared. I mean, we saw countries in UK where nurses were wearing bin badge to go to hospitals, and and US. But I think what is upsetting is not that we were not prepared, but the fact that we are not seeing evidence-based policy correction. Now, look, if we zoom out a bit, if we go back from Bangladesh and zoom out a bit, and we can say certain over the last 6 months, we now can say few things with certainty, even though a lot of things are unknown. I think the first thing we can say with certainty, and that's something that Bill Gates keeps saying, that perhaps life will not come back to normal before a vaccination is invented, right? It gets invented,
Yeah,
and
I
I
think
think
that's
that's
fair
for
to say.
sure. I think no matter what we do, life, this is the new normal, and life will not go back to the old ways till a vaccination is invented. However, there's a big however there, that till a vaccination is invented, countries that can contain community transmission will do much better in terms of saving more lives and giving more scope to the economy in comparison to countries who fail to contain community transmission. I think that is a fact now. And now, from the epidemiologists and all the pandemic experts, another good news is that the health protocols that they suggested to contain community transmission actually works. That's what we saw from the world. What we saw from Italy. That is what we saw from Germany. That is what we saw from Sri Lanka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. Whoever followed the health protocol to contain the community transmission, which was a hard lockdown, complemented by safety nets, complemented by testing, tracing, and isolation, contained the community transmission. And now there is no debate that that policy is not good for containing community transmission. I think there's evidential support. However, if you are even better than that and you never allowed community transmission, then such as Vietnam, such as Taiwan, such as Malaysia, you could have got away with aggressive testing, aggressive tracing, aggressive isolation, and some area-based lockdown. And even countries which are now have contained community transmission, such as China and UK, they have to occasionally go with area lockdowns, such as we're seeing in Beijing and Leicester, if the virus comes up. This is the new normal we have seen. And if you look at this approach, the good news is, look, Vietnam has contained it in 1.5 months. Germany has contained it in 3 months. Sri Lanka has contained it in 3.5 months. There is clear evidence that irrespective of your GDP per capita, your commitment to public health matters. Because Vietnam has a per capita income of $2,200.
Not a
It
great
was
deal more
able,
than us.
exactly, not a great deal more than us, but it did a much better job than even United States. It shows what at the end of the day matters is your commitment to public health.
So
Now,
what went
having,
wrong, I mean, Ashik, and what do you think
I think,
was the stumbling block for us? Because we have a
so,
lot of things going for us. One of the things we have, for instance, we have 160,000 community health workers here in Bangladesh. We have very active non-governmental, non-profit organizations who are out there in the field. We could have mobilized these resources. But
I think,
ICTDRB is a world-class research institution, and we talked about this at a talk show webinar I was on just the other night. They seem to have been sidelined, somewhat absent from the field in this crisis. And this is a world-class institution who is in fact doing world-class research on epidemiology in this specific area.
I think I agree with you. I think what went wrong. Look, in our previous discussions, I think we were talking about various events that we thought were blunders, such as not going for the lockdown but the general holiday, the circus by BGMEA, and then the premature opening up on the 14th of May, and continuously doing lower testing than even countries like Pakistan, who we get an ego boost by saying that we are better than Pakistan in everything, but Pakistan is now doing 25,000 to 30,000 testing, whereas we are stuck between 15 and 18,000 testing for the last 2 weeks. But today, I think I want to go a bit deeper. I feel that these policy mistakes are a manifestation of a lack of understanding of and clarity about how we should have addressed the problem. And the start of the problem happened with that great quote unquote debate, balancing life versus livelihood. I have given this a very serious thinking. I felt that from the very beginning, we have framed the problem in a very wrong way. The issue was never about balancing life and livelihood. For me, the issue was about not getting the right balance, but about getting the right sequence. See, during our liberation war, did we go and say, let's find the balance between liberty and livelihood? Do we, during warfare, do we say, let's find the balance between de-escalation and dialogue? No, de-escalation first, dialogue follows. Over here, what we should have done, that we should have listened to epidemiologists who had a clear understanding of the problem, at least from WHO and CDC and Europe, that first contain community transmission and then focus on economic recovery, which needed a strict lockdown, which needed safety nets, which needed aggressive testing protocols. We did not do that. We went for the right balance, but not the right sequencing. And that is partly because, and I think I have to say, and our profession is also blamed for this, that we were more interested to listen to economists who poke their nose in every issue nowadays. And we were more interested to listen to business leaders and NGO leaders rather than real epidemiologists. That's, I think, where we got it wrong. Because when you allowed too many interests to come into the plate, they all pulled you in different directions. You did not have clarity of what you really wanted. I felt Bangladesh lacked clear clarity of what we really wanted. If you look at the West, if you look at Vietnam, there is clear clarity of what they want. They want to save as many lives as possible. And while doing that, they want to give safety nets to the vulnerables. And then when they have contained community transmission, they want to give economic recovery a chance. That has worked for Vietnam. That has worked for New Zealand. That is working for many countries in Europe. Unfortunately,
right, we never had that. We never had that commitment to say, okay, we're going to focus on breaking the back of the virus spread. Is our fundamental, primary, preeminent goal. We never really focused on it that way. We always balanced it out.
And I think that is where we got it wrong, because when you want to, so when you frame the problem by saying that the challenge is about balancing lives and livelihood, you automatically go into a different direction, because then you think that is possible and you are experimenting in a policy zone which has so many uncertainties. I think I told this example in a last talk show with you, that when you have such high degrees of uncertainty, that will this virus remain strong? Will a vaccine come within a year? Will it be, can you roll it? Can you roll it within 1.5 years to all your population, right? When you have so many uncertainties, well, will there be a second wave? You don't experiment. You don't toss a coin and say, let's do an experiment. Let's do the Bangladeshi style of smart containment or some kind of Bangladeshi style containment. You follow the standard health protocol. And I think that experimentation did not go well.
So let me ask you a question. So what did countries like, Vietnam, I think, is a very singular example, but what did a country like Sri Lanka do, which we didn't do and we could have done?
Well, Sri Lanka did a strict lockdown with a curfew. I wrote that op-ed in your article, that Sri Lanka had a curfew, they had a strict lockdown, they had safety nets for the poor. Even Kerala, the model that we keep citing, had a very strict lockdown, had food at doorstep for the vulnerable, had a very strong community awareness program. And I know many people say that Bangladesh is not Kerala. I totally agree. but we could have drawn at least a lot of the basic principles from the Kerala approach or the Vietnam. But Vietnam and Kerala is different because they solved the problem before community transmission. Bangladesh had community transmission, so we could not have played the Vietnam or the Malaysia game
Right, I'm
or
just saying I
the
don't think that's a really apposite compared to I asked about Sri Lanka, for instance. I don't know if that is a better comparison, but
So Sri Lanka is a better comparison because Sri Lanka did have a bit of community transmission, and I think they got the strict lockdown with the curfew, and they came out. So I think where we are all kind of bit shocked or kind of bit in uncertain waters is that now that there is absolute evidence about how to contain this problem, not solve the problem totally, why is
but here's
Bangladesh
my question, Ashiq.
walking?
I mean, yes, we all know theoretically in another country how you could contain this problem, but do we have the capability and the capacity here in Bangladesh? Because the first thing which you need to contain this problem is data. We don't have any reliable data. The first thing we need is testing. You need to be constantly testing people. We have not. Now this could be, it's kind of a different kind of a problem we're talking about. We have not developed the capacity to test. Right now we're testing less than 20,000 people a day. Okay, just simply for a country of 160 million, it's almost neither here nor there. Okay, it tells us absolutely nothing about the prevalence of the disease. And there was an article. We had an article. Many other people covered it as well, talking about how 40% of the people who tested positive, the authorities had no idea where they were. But as someone else pointed out, well, what does it matter whether we know where the 40% are or 4% or 100%? Because that's only a drop in the bucket of the actual number, most likely, of people who are actually infected. And of course, I say most likely because the honest to God truth is we don't know that either. So in the absence of all of this information, lockdowns, strict lockdowns, for instance, when you talk about what we had talked about, we'd say, okay, in a certain locality, if there are more than 60 cases out of 100,000 testing positive, then you have this kind of a lockdown. If it's over 100 cases, you do this. If it's below 30 cases, you do that. And this has been done in many countries. But then you need to have confidence in your numbers. So if you don't have confidence, how do you do it?
I totally agree. So given that we don't have data, that is why, see, first, when we had no policy of how to contain this problem and the zonal policies were discussed, I was not a big fan of the zonal policy, but I thought something is better than nothing. At least that's better than completely opening up. But my reservation with zonal policy was that we simply don't have the data. Now, I think the strict lockdown does not depend on that data problem as the zonal lockdown depends. Because strict lockdown is nationwide.
Yeah. And I think what you need is the staggered lockdown. If you say, okay, we're going to be 14 days, then 10 days, then 14 days, then 10 days. But again, like I said, you're right. You can base it on data, or you can just say, we don't have the data, let's just base it on time. We'll do it for 30 days, then we'll open up for 15. And you accept the fact that you're somewhat throwing darts, but that's kind of a model which has worked elsewhere, and we don't have the data to be more precise than that, and so we could give that a shot. Yeah.
See, when countries like Germany went into the hard lockdown, or Sri Lanka went into the hard lockdown, they were just started their testing. They did not test 10% of their population when they went for the strict lockdown, because what they were seeing is that whoever they were testing, they were getting very high detection rate, right?
Yeah.
So I think you don't need to test 100% of your country to understand that there is a problem in the country. I think if you do a random sample and you see that
10,000 people would be more than enough. I mean,
more than enough.
You're an economist. You understand how statistical sampling works. That is
exactly.
a robust sample.
Exactly. So if you could have done a 20,000 random sample, you could have understood the population problem and how big is the population problem, and you could have tailored the response.
Doing that, I think.
We never did that. And I think, as I said, the part of the problem started with lack of clarity about what we wanted to do, and that is why we allowed that uh, I would say wrongly framed debate about balancing lives and livelihoods enter our policy space, and then cloud and create all these confusions that we have seen accepted. But now I think we have moved beyond that to a point. Now that, we are no longer talking about zonal lockdown, or maybe it will be given a chance after the Qurbani Eid. But at this point, I think we have taken a complete U-turn and went for a curative approach and not a preventive approach for this problem. And I think the subconsciously, and this is a big policy gamble, that we are feeling that the problem will not be as bad as Brazil, or the problem will not be as bad as US, that we won't jump from 100,000 test
But again, like I
positive
said,
cases.
is it unreasonable to conclude that, given the fact that we're I think 105 days from our first infection? Okay, 105. I'm not sure entirely. And if you look at where countries like the US or the UK or Italy or Spain were, or Brazil, in that time period, it's astronomical difference. It's off the charts. So already, obviously, presumably, the model which was followed in those countries is not being followed here. I'm talking about the model of the spread of the virus. Now, even if things get bad, it's already different from what happened there.
I have always discussed with you and many people, I have always felt that the viruses don't move at the same pace in different continents. That's a proven fact. People in different continents have different degrees of immunity, and the viruses have always, in their history, have moved at different pace at different continents. Now, we might have some advantage. Even scientists say that people in South Asia are relatively younger. You have a relatively warmer climate. You might have
of the age of 80 compared to the US.
Exactly.
It's a big distinction.
Exactly. And you have BCG hypotheses. So you have so many hypotheses, which gives a natural advantage to South Asia. So I'm not ruling that out. However, I am saying that given the size of the population and given the state of the healthcare system, those advantages can be outweighed by 3 million cases in Bangladesh. Even if we reach 5 million cases and US reaches 100 million cases, they might have some healthcare to provide at that level of infection, but Bangladesh will not be able to deal with 3 million cases, even despite...
Here's the thing, Ashik. What is the... here's the thing. I've been saying the same thing as you since the start. I had assumed, if you'd asked me 3 months ago where we would be on July 1st, I would have assumed, however, that things would have been much worse, okay? Because we have all of the pathogens, you could say, for this disease to spread massively in Bangladesh. Look, we have the most densely populated country in the world. And so social distancing or doing these kinds of distancing is very difficult for us, okay? We also have a population which, doesn't necessarily follow rules, and we also had problems with our public health delivery systems. We have problems in our administration. If you added it all up, it certainly seemed as though Bangladesh was going to be really hit hard. If you could pick a country off the globe and you say, okay, this is a country which is going to be hit by COVID-19 the most, I would have picked Bangladesh. It seemed everything was in place for this to hit us.
But why are you thinking that we are? You don't know the problem because you have not tested the problem, and you have undertested death, and you have undertested the actual amount of people who have it. I think there is a difference here.
Here's the thing. I think
we are seeing hospitals getting flooded. We are seeing people without getting COVID.
Like Bombay. It's not that level of catastrophe, which is something you would have expected to have seen. I'm not. Given how absolutely paltry our public health and even to some extent our private health facilities are, it's shocking that within 3 months we have not been more flooded. It was something I was expecting to see much, much worse.
So this is the thing. This echoes with the discussion we had 3 months before, when the problem was not accelerating at a very high rate, and we were saying that maybe the problem is not that bad. But now we are saying yes, we are not as bad as US, but it is pretty bad for Bangladesh to handle in terms of the health systems are over flooded. If you talk to the policymakers, if you talk to the doctors, they are getting out of, they have reached their tipping point. So yes, the problem is perhaps is definitely not as bad as Europe or Italy in terms of how the infection has spread. But even when you factor in that advantage, the rate at which it is growing, even if you extrapolate the Bangladeshi rate and hold that to be the true rate, say 5,000 cases a day, if that's the true rate, then you are in a big problem in 3 months, given your health capacity. So we don't have to um, say that the problem is better than Brazil or US, so we can relax. I am saying even if you're in Bangladesh, and even if we just extrapolate the Bangladeshi trend as the true trend, you have a really big problem in your hand in 3 months, and the curative approach will not help. I think there is now a global consensus that this kind of problem needs a preventive approach and not a curative approach. We have pushed our daughters. We are not seeing these signs. A daughter was killed by a mob in Kunla. A coffin parade happened in Sylhet. People are dying on the streets. These are, and now, if you look at even the economy, we kept the economy open for 45 days, and we are seeing barely 40 to 50% of activity.
What do you think
So,
that? No,
so
carry on.
my bottom line is, given what we have done, we have neither achieved lives or nor livelihood, and we are slowly making life and death a useless statistics or an underreported statistics. We're heading towards the zone where life and death is slowly turning into, a statistics that gets repeated every day without really understanding what it means for Bangladesh. I am giving you an example. We have lost so many experts, healthcare experts at their prime, who would have been mentoring future generation health experts. There was a person who died. There were ICU experts who have worked for 25 years, for 30 years, and now they're dead. How do you replace that expertise, that loss of expertise? How do you replace that? These are just not people that you push in from the pipeline and voila, you have the perfect substitute. Bangladesh is losing real expertise in the
Sure.
health
What do you
sector.
think
And if you
actually
keep the floodgate open, this will keep on happening. And the
What do
current
you see
policies
as
are
the
not
game
happening.
plan? What do you see as the policy of the government, the game plan? What is underpinning their policy, how they're dealing with it? How do you think they're looking at it? What do they think is going to happen over the next 3 months, over the next 6 months, over the next 9 months, over the next year? Or do you think they haven't actually looked that far?
I think they have taken a gamble. I
Okay.
think that's a very good question. I think policymakers have taken a gamble in the sense that they have they have they have somehow estimated or somehow assumed that, as you were correctly saying, that the problem will not be as bad as Europe, and the problem will not be as bad as US. For me, that is a big gamble with public health. I
Yeah.
think that is what my reservation is, that evidence does not support that gamble, but that perhaps is the thinking, that let us protect livelihoods as much as we can and wait for a vaccine, and let's increase our doctors and increase our nurses, take a curative approach and make that gamble. I think the policymakers have made that gamble. Now,
And
in
you
in
think they
life,
figure that if we keep deaths to less than 100 a day, that we can handle that in terms of the society will accept it, that will not overflow our medical reserves, in our medical resources, and that, and it's a lot of people, but it's, at the end of the day, in a year that's 36,000. Okay, which in America is already gone over 100,000 some time back.
Exactly. So I think that is why there's a conscious effort to even keep testing low. I mean, which country? I saw a report in Dhaka Tribune, the rich and very advanced Afghanistan does not charge for testing, but the very middle income country, Bangladesh, has started introducing a fee for testing. Now, who are we discouraging from testing with that 200 taka charge? Are we really discouraging the rich? We are only discouraging the poor. And you saw these narratives even from business leaders 2 months ago that our poor are invisible, are invincible, I am sorry, and they won't be affected by COVID because they have very good health, very good metabolism, said in a very, I don't know, but these are the rhetorics that have
in
flooded.
fairness, I mean, when the garment industry was reopened earlier than many of us, you and me included, had counseled against, and we anticipated far greater catastrophe than we're actually seeing. In fairness,
how do you know? There is no testing. That's what I'm saying. The problem is
no
the poor will not.
People were dropping dead in droves. We would know about this. Now
that I agree with you. See, we have to divide the problem into two bits. One is what COVID does in terms of death, and what COVID does in terms of your long-term health damage. And you might be right that we are subjecting people to COVID, thinking it won't kill them most of the time. But now there is emerging evidence that you might have long-term respiratory problems. It might have long-term liver and kidney problems. You might have long-term pancreas problems. And you might have these real problems down the line. So yes, you will survive COVID, but you will have a very poor quality life. Now, these are the choices we have made because we are only focused on death, and somehow we are lucky that many people like Europe, we haven't seen scenes like Europe. Now, this is what I'm coming to. The government, I think the policymakers have taken a gamble. If people start dying in hundreds, say 2 months down the line or 1 month down the line, there might be a policy correction.
Right, then they will change. Then they'll switch policy. You see, then
perhaps. Yes. So that is, I think. But the question then is, as I keep saying, that do you learn to wear the seat belt after crashing the car, or do you see other countries and learn to wear the seat belt? So after costing lives, livelihoods, and the health workers who are dying, do you change decision then, or do you predict and take a prudent approach before? But let's change this question. Why have we taken this gamble? Let's ask that question. We have taken this gamble to save the economy. Is the economy being saved? That's another question. With this public health crisis, even at its current level, we know that Bangladesh is the only country with community transmission. We know that in the sense, let me rephrase. Bangladesh, we know, has community transmission, and our business leaders are not investing money. Most middle class are not consuming non-essentials. If you look at the consumption, if you look at investment data, things are not changing. So you have taken that gamble to save the economy, but it is apparent that people are not responding because they fear a community transmission. Now, you might say it's a less than 1% death rate, don't be afraid, but those who are investing the money, should they be investing money in a country where there's a public health crisis prolonged? So I have always kept saying that
my question is that there will be other countries, and I think what you say is very salient indeed, in that, the fact of the matter is, the longer the COVID is a public health crisis in Bangladesh, the less likely it seems to me that, our export industries, for instance, are going to pick up. And this is especially worrisome in light of the fact that Vietnam seems to have knocked the problem on the head, and Vietnam is probably our single most direct competitor.
And this is then exactly an article I have written in Financial Express the other day, that I think the management of COVID-19 will probably create the second divergence within Asia, which is the difference between China and India and Bangladesh and Vietnam. Because India is handling the problem far worse than China. I mean, China should not be said bad. China has handled the problem. And given Bangladesh is not handling the problem as good as Vietnam, or maybe I should say that Vietnam is excellent and we are not even good, this is going to be the next tipping point of the next economic divergence within Asia. And forget exports. I think we are always talking about exports, but we are not looking at what is happening within the domestic economy. 50% of your SMEs are closed in one of your reports. Every
Mhm.
day, 50,000 people are leaving Dhaka, going back to their villages. Now you have opened the economy, taken that gamble to save the economy, but it's not working. So my position is, we have neither saved lives and nor we have saved livelihood. What we have done is we have said lockdown is anti-poor, but actually lockdown is not anti-poor. Prolonging this pandemic is turning out to be anti-poor. So you have made those, for me, big gambles, and the results don't
Surely there's
support.
surely, Ashik, if you're talking about 50% of the SMEs which are being shuttered, that is not to do with the crisis. That's to do with the curative. That's to do with the lockdown. I mean, the crisis alone would not have caused them to shut themselves down. And with most of the businesses, the COVID crisis, the crisis is not what's causing people financial hardship. That's not what's closed schools. That's not what's closed restaurants and hotels. That's not what's closing businesses. It is our response to the crisis which has closed them.
And I absolutely agree. Our response, the very premise where you think that you can have a public health crisis, where there's community transmission, where you're seeing your friends losing their father, where you're seeing your relatives losing, it might not be happening to you. Does that give you the confidence to be a very active economic agent? The answer is no. We have seen from Africa, when the
No,
malaria
no, that
crisis
makes
was
total
there.
sense. You're hardly likely to invest in this climate. You're hardly
Exactly.
likely to start up a new business in such a climate. That's true.
Exactly. And that is what I'm saying, that you have taken a gamble to save the economy, and you have put public health as a second order importance and economy as the first order. But
Mhm.
that what it's showing, at least for the last 2 months, if you talk to any chairman of any bank, just ask them how much interest payments they have received over the last 1 month. It's below 50% in most of the banks. People are not paying their interest because their sales have not picked up. People are not buying stuffs because people are unclear how long this crisis will prolong. People are unclear about their jobs. People are unclear about their salary. That will my salary be crushed by 1/3 within the next 2 months? These things are everyday discussion within the economic
So I
spectrum,
think
and
your
that is.
argument is that if we had taken the strong medicine at the start, yes, it would have been painful, but actually by now we would be coming out of the pain. And by not taking the strong medicine, we're going to be feeling the pain indefinitely.
Exactly, until a vaccine is there. I mean, but at this current approach, you have extended the problem. You have the. I think the problem has that we have outweighed the short-term benefits with the long-term loss. We overestimated the short-term benefits of opening up the economy, and we have fundamentally underestimated the long-term cost of doing that. And I think we got that balance wrong. And as the evidence now suggesting that the gamble was taken to reopen the economy, give people a breathing space, and let's hope the problem is not as bad as it is in Europe or US. However, given we targeted the economy, it did not deliver on the economic front. Question is,
Where do things stand economically right now, then? I mean,
when
as an economist, could you shed some light on where things, how have things picked up or not in the last 1 month? I mean, what are we seeing?
So, I mean, the data is there for May and June. I think for May, the exports are 60% lower than it was in May in 2019. If you look at the new poor, anecdotal evidence is saying that at least 10 million new poor have been created. If you look at anecdotal evidence, again, you see that the consumption has not picked up to more than 50%. If you look at the basic consumption of non-essentials, not essentials.
Right, there's a
And
big problem in aggregate demand, yes.
exactly. And my question is, this is a bit like the Great Depression, where we as economists, we know how to solve the aggregate demand problem. Print money, give people stimulus, they will go and start buying. But that will only happen when the public health crisis is no longer there. So you can always address that aggregate demand problem. And Bangladesh has certain cushions. For the last 10 years, our deficit has been 5% of GDP, which
Yeah.
basically means our public debt is 34 to 36% of GDP, where in US it's 110%, Europe it's again 100 to 100%. So we
Very
have
good.
that
We have
cushion.
we've had a lot of fiscal discipline, and now is the time to draw down on that. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have those cushions. We have built those cushions into our economy. That is our resilience. But we can only use those weapons when I feel that the public health crisis is
Is done.
contained. And
Now, I mean, I
now
think the thing is this. You see, I mean, it's like, there's that great joke where someone says, well, how would can you tell me how to get to London from here? And then the person tells them, well, if you want to go to London, I wouldn't start from here. But that's where you are. I mean, the thing is this. For us, maybe a lot of this is what we should have done over the last 3 months. And then certainly maybe, and it's interesting because probably if we'd been much harder over those first 3 months, much tighter, we'd be in a position to actually open up much more right now. Anyway, it is what it is. But here's the thing, Ashik. I mean, here's my point, right? My point is that if you look at numbers, right now we're moving up to 40, 50 people dying every day. And those are the official numbers. Unofficially, it may be much more than that. We don't really know. But, this number was, a dozen about a month ago, and it's been going up, right? Sort of my question is, let's say we have a strict lockdown. What happens is you can never really we're not going to be able to bring it down to zero. Okay? And so whatever
it's not about it's not about bringing it to zero.
The argument is that really what you're doing is you're just pushing, you're not flattening the curve, you're pushing the curve to the right.
No, I don't agree with that argument. I think what we saw from Europe, and I think what we saw from other successful cases is you contain community transmission, you open up, but that doesn't mean the problem is solved. That means you keep testing, tracing, and isolating, and go to area-based lockdowns whenever you see a spark of fire. That is the new normal that we have to live with. Nobody is saying open the economy when you have zero cases. No, China has put Beijing under lockdown because that's the new normal you have to navigate. That is because China does not want Beijing to have what Wuhan had, where there was an explosion of cases. So the new normal is contain community transmission and open up your economy. You will never reach that where you were before till a vaccine was there. That is what we have to accept, irrespective of whether you are New Zealand, South Korea, Singapore, or Vietnam. However, you have to use these protocols of testing, tracing, and isolation, and area-based lockdown whenever the spark happens in certain. But for that, you need to know what the data is. So I feel personally, forget what has happened over the last 3 months. I think that's done and dusted. Now we are opening up. We will eventually see the consequence within the next 1 month of what will happen due to this opening up. Is the economy picking up? Are we counting more dead bodies? Are doctors dying more? Is our health sector crashing down? If we have a picture of those four issues within the next 2 months, I feel the way forward should be that exponentially increase your testing capacity to at least 50,000. I think that's a loose word of the use exponential, but say to 50,000. If Pakistan can do 30,000, let us try to do 50,000. Let us do random sampling of testing to get a sense of how the problem is across the country. And if we see that we are not getting the economic dividend and we are counting the dead bodies, let the evidence dictate the policy correction. All we are saying is so far the evidence does not support what the policy status quo is. If we add more evidence to that in next 1 or 2 months, I think the case for a strict lockdown will be even more stronger. At least a 50-day lockdown, open, followed by zonal opening. See, one of the problems I had with the zonal approach, I thought it, personally, I would say that it was done with extreme hard work. It was done by very good people. It was done with very good intention. But one of the academic differences or reservations I had with the zonal approach was that we simply did not have the data to do zonal lockdown at the ward level that we wanted to do. However, I thought this is at least better than completely opening up. But now, if we create that data of 50,000 by doing 50,000 testing every day, then 1 month down the line, we will have a lot of data to do area-based lockdowns followed by, strict lockdown followed by area-based
See
opening.
things going in the now the interesting thing is we're in the middle of summer, and so as August and September comes, what is important, of course, is the school year. Okay, and that's a very big policy question which policymakers will need to take. Do you have any indication of because that's going to really kind of be the canary in the coal mine of trying to figure out where this thing is going. So do you have any idea how they're going to deal with that particular issue? And what do you think is the best solution?
See, I don't think you can put children's on the front line while you have a public health crisis. I won't send my daughter to school, even if the country is open for the next 2 years. I mean, why should I risk my daughter's life, even if the risk is 0.5%? I mean, I don't care. I mean, it will come down to those decisions that
no,
if you have a public health...
I mean, that's true. But I mean, when we, we're both parents, of course, so I understand what you're saying. But when you put your kid in a car, you're also to some extent risking their life.
No.
You have to look at the numbers. If you look at the 1,888 people who've died in Bangladesh, what are the number of people of ages from 0 to 10 who've died?
That is only because we have stopped the schools, and that is, I think, we have done it well. That we have went for the school. You are not seeing children's dead bodies because you have stopped the schools. If you open up the schools,
by and large, it's the older you are, it's the
fine. I agree. I agree with that. I mean, irrespective of what the percentage is, I don't personally think how much. My daughter is 6-year-old. How much, if a vaccine is there in 1 year's time, I don't mind she losing a year for a safer life. That is a risk I'm going to take with my daughter. I mean, for me, life precedes education and the money she will make in her life.
I mean, I think there is an issue with kids. And again, like I said, people like you and I are perhaps more fortunate than others because, we have larger houses, nicer houses, all of that thing. Mental health is a big issue. Okay. The mental strain of staying home is massive. Especially on kids. I think those of us who are a little older, we can handle it a little bit better. But I think it shouldn't be.
But the question is, the issue of mental health, the issue of domestic violence, the issue of all these issues that are there are only there because we have not solved the community transmission. If we had, if you saw every day that you are doing 30,000 cases and 50 people are getting detected, or 300 people are getting detected, I would go out. I would go out with my daughter. I would send her to school. I wouldn't mind my wife going to the shopping mall. If that is the kind of detection rate you are getting, which is a 1%, but now it's 20%. That is as high as it was in Italy during its peak. The
No,
question
but
is, we all take a bit of risk.
statistic,
We
Ashi.
all take a bit of risk.
You've already said that we're not testing enough people. So the 20% is merely a function of the few people
No,
we're testing.
no. So this is the thing. This is the thing. I think
Remains
this.
20%,
No,
right?
no, no, no.
No.
But this is the thing. Most countries did symptom-based testing in their early days. Italy, Germany, most countries, US, did symptom-based testing. Bangladesh is doing symptom-based testing. So that's not a problem. Bangladesh is testing 18,000 people, looking at symptoms, and they're finding 4,000 people. That's a very high number. That is what Italy did. Italy found. So when you look at the detection rate, the problem of underestimating the problem is gone because both are following the same algorithm, which is symptom-based testing. I'm not talking about the absolute number of the problem. I'm talking about uh, with people with symptom, the rate of COVID is high. But now, even if with people, if you remain with that protocol, and that figure goes down to 2%, like it is in Germany now, or Italy now, or any other country now, or less than 1%, then people will come out. That's fine. They're going to go out with a mask. They're going to go out with a gloves. You can bring in
Another
all
thing
those
I
health
think
protocols.
we've made a mistake on, though, I have to say, is that as far as I understand, is that almost all transmission is in enclosed areas. You see, so not going out. I think it's if you go out and you're on the road and you're keeping a distance and you're wearing a mask. I think that's relatively safe. Most of the transmission is, in fact, in enclosed areas. So, for instance, if you're going to the office, that could be dangerous. If you're going to a restaurant, dangerous. Movie theaters, forget about it. We're talking about going out to enclosed areas, shopping malls. These are always vectors of the
Exactly,
spread of the virus.
exactly,
But just going
exactly,
out, it seems to me,
exactly.
the latest data I've seen suggests that that's not in and of itself risky, yet somehow that's something which we've got into our minds, that we shouldn't step
But
out of bounds.
let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. I saw from my window the other day two young boys wearing a mask, walking in the street, but they're holding each other's hands. These are the problems we have in Bangladesh. We don't understand the problem in terms of how the behavioral changes that is needed. I absolutely agree with you that once the detection rate comes down below 2%, we'll never go back to the old normal without a vaccination, but there will be a new normal in which we do many things in a more secured way. And that is the life we have to adjust to. As you correctly said, we all have incorporated the risk of traffic accident in our lives. We have to incorporate the risk of COVID in our lives. But
It
question
will
is,
never be
at
able to
what
eliminate it. Yeah.
exactly until a vaccination is there? So, but the only problem is at what rate is acceptable to you. When the detection rate is 20%, that is not an acceptable rate, because that is showing us even when you have done all the precaution, the virus is entering your house. I was just talking to one of your staffs at Dhaka Tribune whose mother got tested positive.
Sure.
He was saying that he did everything right and it still got to his family. So at this detection
Sure. We're
rate,
hearing a lot
we
of that.
cannot we cannot bring life to new normal. So my position here is, we have made some policy mistakes, fine. Let the evidence dictate the policy correction, and let epidemiologists, not economists, not NGOs, not business leaders, but actual epidemiologists with a history of handling pandemics dictate the policy. I think that is where we need clarity. That is the clarity,
So here's
if
my question, and
given to policy
I
making, will
think what
solve
I
the problem.
can agree with you on this is that when you say there's a lack of clarity, it's not just that. It's, if you ask me who's calling the shots, it's unclear to me who is actually. I know that there's a committee, there's an expert committee which is helping with the DGHS, but at the fundamental level, I don't know who's calling the shots and how these decisions are being made. You see, and
That's a
to what extent people are listening.
that's $1 million question, Zafar. Bhai, don't put me on the spot for that question. I mean, nobody knows why we have done what we have done. Let's say we have done what we have done. Let's now change by looking at the evidence and get clarity that public health should always precede the economy, because when you put economy over public health, the economy never picks up. And that's the evidence. That is what we are seeing now. That is what we saw from Africa when they could not solve the malaria crisis, and the nations remained poor because they could not solve the public health crisis.
Let me ask you a question, Ashik. What other countries do you see are currently in the same situation as Bangladesh is in? And do you see that they will also have the same problems we will moving forward?
Oh, well, Pakistan is in the same boat as Bangladesh.
India?
Bangladesh and Pakistan. India is also in a state of confusion, but Indian detection rate is much lower. It's 8%, whereas we are 20 to 22%. Pakistan is also 22%. But India, the problem with India is that India, you see all these various states.
Is it because they are now testing more people and not just people with heavy symptoms?
I personally don't know what is the health the testing protocol in India, but what it seems apparent to India from in the Indian story, that states where Modi has least influence are doing much better where Modi has influence, such as Tamil Nadu, such as Kerala. States where Modi cannot interfere is doing much better because of the communist tradition or the public commitment to public health in the South. I think that has been documented in many books of Professor Zafar Sobhan, Professor Amartya Sen, that Kerala and Tamil Nadu, they had a history of how they have given political and economic commitment to the issue of health.
An argument, of course, that may have been something that helped Vietnam as well, because they do have a certain background.
Exactly. And I think, again, if you look at the Indian story, it's very interesting because you see, again, one of the articles I wrote in your Dhaka Tribune was foolish citizens and smart bureaucrats. In India, we had a similar article that bureaucrats are calling the shot and not experts, but that's not the way the world is dealing the problem. So I guess Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, we have a common thread. I mean, we can't get rid of that common thread. And I think that common thread is also having its implications for how we are making our policies in these three countries.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Ashik, thank you very much. This has been a eye-opening and enlightening discussion, as it always is. Let's see where things go in the next 1 month, the next 2 months, the next 3 months. I fear you may be right. I'm not sure that there is going to be any quick end to the problems we're facing here in Bangladesh. Let's see where things stand. I think the next 3 months are going to be absolutely crucial. The only glimmer of hope I have is that if you'd asked me 3 months ago where we would have been today, I would have been less optimistic than the reality. So hopefully, similarly, 3 months from now, what you're seeing, what I'm seeing, what many people are seeing in terms of what is a possible worst case scenario may not come to pass. But as you've mentioned, that is in the final analysis something of a gamble, and it's probably not the best basis upon which to base public policy. So thank you very much, Ashik.
Thank you. Stay safe. Stay safe, Zafar. Thank you.
And thank you to our viewers. This has been the first episode of Season 3 of Straight Talk. Please join us again next Wednesday. This will be every Wednesday at 9 p.m. on Dhaka Tribune social media channels. You can catch us on our YouTube page. You can catch us on our Facebook page. You can catch us on the Dhaka Tribune website homepage. Thank you very much, everyone, and good night.